flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start with the minutes, I'd just like to take a minute to thank Dave and Ernie for their service to this commission in the town of Old Saybrook. And be their last meeting, I believe, for each of you. I just want to say thank you very much from myself personally, from the commission, and from the town. Ernie, what can I say up there? How many years? Too many. Wow. Just want to say thank you very much to both of you. Thanks for your help, and be missed.
Hold on.
Okay, minutes from the September 28th regular meeting.
I have a minor little thing on page 7. The 8th paragraph. I think it's the polygraph and psychological review.
Is this the
No,
major
instead of social.
Page 7, it starts out,
It's just a-
Chairman Finch stated they are not fulfilling the town's charter. That's the first line on the page.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so, yeah.
Oh, we'll fix that. Right here, I see it. Okay.
Okay. Any other corrections or discussions of the minutes?
Move they be approved.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Comments from the public, please. Anyone have a comment like to state? Yes, sir.
Good evening, Dylan Lee, Fox Hill Road. I'd like to thank the commissioners for their service as well. Just a brief comment, there's many reasons that people move to a town. Good school system, good property values, low tax rate, safe community. And I'd like to thank the police department, members of the police department, for the work that they did last week in ensuring a couple of those things to be continuous, safe community and safe schools. So just like this, as a parent of children in the school system, just like to extend my own personal thank you for the work that you've done.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Paul
sir.
Carmichael, Old Saybrook. Ernie, as a neighbor, I just want to thank you for all your time on the police commission. Thank you again. I just want to echo his comments. I have children in middle school and in the elementary school. And in light of the events that happened last week, I just felt great that we have a great police commission, a great police department, and I know a lot of parents that are just very thankful to have what we have in this town and to be able to prevent, God forbid, acts of violence. And that just really means a lot to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda is operational workshop, domestic violence response. Chief, you want to start that out?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. So as we discussed at a previous meeting, October is Domestic Violence Prevention Awareness Month. And I thought it was a great opportunity for the Commission to have another operational workshop on what the department does in a specific category. So I've asked Sergeant DePerry to make a presentation to the Police Commission on our domestic violence response program and kind of give you insight on what we do, how we do it, and why we have to do it with respect to calls for domestic violence. So with that, I will turn it over to Sergeant DePerry, who will make the presentation. I will say this before he starts, and I've said it about a lot of the things that we as an agency do. Law enforcement is very personal, it's very private. So there are many things that we do during a day to help victims of crime that we do not publicize. So oftentimes there's a cry of, why do we have so many police officers? What are they doing all day? We do a lot. There's a lot of things we do, but there's a lot of things that we just can't talk about because it's just not right to talk about them. And one of them is domestic violence cases. They are very personal and very, very private cases and very intense investigations, as the sergeant will allude to. So without further ado, Sergeant Perry.
Yes. So certainly something that we don't celebrate within our community, but October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I think it's important for us to get an understanding of what actually goes on in our town and what we do at each individual domestic violence case. One of the big things about awareness is domestic violence knows no boundaries. It's here, it's in every town in Connecticut, it's in every town in the country, and it's something that is private, that does not get announced except when something pretty bad happens. So that's what we want to talk about this month. That's why we've done a couple of things in the department, which we'll talk about. 1 in 4 women are victims of domestic violence, and 1 in 7 men are victims of domestic violence. So the reason that the chief asked me to speak about this is I am the domestic violence instructor. I'm a post-certified instructor for domestic violence. Domestic violence is a mandated recertification area. So every 3 years, each police officer in Connecticut has to go through at least 2 hours of domestic violence training. So I'm responsible for our department's training involving domestic violence. It is definitely an ever-evolving training cycle. We're going to talk a little bit about how it's been evolving recently. I'm also the department's domestic violence liaison to the state. The state is overseen by an organization called the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and they monitor our policies, and they require that there's a liaison in each police department in Connecticut and several with the state police. Basically what that entails is I ensure our compliance with the new domestic violence state policy. So each domestic violence report has to meet minimum requirements, and each investigation that we have, I'm in charge of overseeing that and making sure that we hit all the bullet points so that we're in compliance with the policy. So a couple things that we've done that you might have noticed around the police department to promote domestic violence awareness. You know, we had a couple of our strategic planning sessions as a police department and an agency when we sat around at different tables. One of the things that our officers mentioned was to promote a more positive image. Again, family violence, domestic violence is not something that we're proud of, but it's something that I think people need to be aware of. And the chief, in the light of victims, asked that we do something this year to show our support for domestic violence victims. And we did put the banners up at the police department, and each of our officers is wearing a domestic violence pin on their uniform. And it's basically just to open up the avenue of conversation. We've had a bunch of people ask, you know, what is that about and what's it for? There was a detailed email that was sent out at the beginning of October when we stepped off on this initiative, and we got everybody on the same page, and it's something that I think each one of our department members has kind of embraced because we're the ones that are responding to these types of calls for service. So domestic violence in Connecticut. There's 14 deaths annually in Connecticut due to domestic violence. There's 150 domestic violence victims that are seriously injured each year. There's over 20,000 arrests each year in Connecticut, and there's over 9,000 requests for restraining orders. So that shows you on a state level how prevalent domestic violence is in Connecticut. Bring that down to a local level, I took the stats from 2012 to present and did an average. We have a little over 50 domestic violence investigations per year. Some years it was 80, some years it was 40. So the average was about 50 per year. We have over 40 domestic violence arrests per year in that average. Again, domestic violence, not always just one person gets arrested. sometimes 2 or more than 2 people get arrested at these calls for service. We have handled over 100 protective orders per year in that period.
Sergeant, what's the typical duration of a protective or restraining order?
So a restraining order is a civil order. That lasts, a temporary restraining order lasts for 30 days, and it lasts for 7 days, and then there's a hearing, and then post-hearing, it lasts for 30 days, and then it can be continued with each hearing that goes on after that.
Okay.
Protective order.
Do that 100 counts each of those continuations?
No, it only counts, it counts the initial.
Cases.
Correct. They're unique cases. Protective order lasts for the duration. Protective order is attached to a criminal case, and it lasts for the duration of the case. So a lot of times those last for about a year. That's about the average.
Thank you.
And I didn't do the math quick enough, but how does that stack up as an average relative to the state of Connecticut?
Good question. I did not have
I'm just curious.
due to time constraints. I didn't play that out. But there are numbers that you can find. It's posted. The latest numbers for the state are usually 2013 or 2014. So you can find those online. So a couple of things about domestic violence in Old Saybrook, a couple of our incidents, and I highlighted the 2013 incident because it utilized a lot of our resources for a long duration of time, and these are involved cases. So in 2013, we had one criminal attempt to commit murder and arson incident. The case was an incident where it's gone through court and the subject has been convicted at this time. He attempted to kill his wife and set the house on fire, and we responded to that. The initial response, 2 or 3 hours. The case lasted for at least 2 months, 3 months, start to finish. It was a long and detailed investigation. So I highlighted that for 2013. 2014, I looked at all of our statistics. We had one criminal attempt to commit murder case. It was a stabbing incident at a local hotel, boyfriend and girlfriend who were living together. So that was one of our most major cases, family violence cases in 2014. We had 8 assault arrests, 2 strangulation arrests, 8 breach of peace incidents, 31 disorderly conduct arrests, and a handful of each of the others: violation of protective order, stalking, threatening, unlawful restraint, interfering with a 911, reckless endangerment, risk of injury to a minor, and criminal mischief. So those are all the statutes that really kind of encompass domestic violence investigations. 2 of these domestic violence investigations or incidents in 2014 involved firearms. So the firearms end brings a whole different realm, and we'll talk a little bit about that in another couple slides here. So what are we doing to prevent domestic violence? That's one of the big pushes at this time in police and domestic violence investigations, and it's been a kind of a paradigm shift. We were always focused on arresting the person who is responsible for victimizing the victim. We arrest the person, we give the victim a small card that has a phone number on it, and we say, here you go, and then we leave. So that shift in the state of Connecticut, and again, at one of our strategic planning sessions, we said, why are we leaving people with nothing else except for a piece of paper with a phone number on it? We should be doing more. There was always a thought that we should be doing more, and I think as a whole, police investigations of domestic violence have changed because we put more of a focus on the victim these days. It's a victim-centered response and prevention. And why do we do that? Is because domestic violence at its core is about power and control. And what happens in a domestic violence situation is once the court is done with what they're going to do, the subject comes back home. There's a lot of reasons for the victim to stay in place. So policy-wise, we have encompassed the victim a little bit more and tried to empower them a little bit more to take back some of that power and control. The way we do that is to provide safety, services, and support to victims. So that's just kind of the model of the power and control scale, something that's presented during each domestic violence training. And we've seen it in a bunch of different forms, but it's basically a cycle of violence. And once it starts, it tends to be circular, and there's got to be a way out, and that's what we're trying to provide with providing more focus to the victim. So the state's answer back in 1985, when Tracy Thurman got murdered, who was kind of the state's case,
She was
model
murdered.
case.
She
What's up?
She wasn't murdered.
Okay. When she got murdered back in 1985, after the police responded to the house numerous times, to domestic violence calls, and they didn't make an arrest, and there was a bunch of different situations going around at that time, police-wise. One of the mottos was, "Don't make us come back or somebody's getting arrested." We didn't take domestic violence as serious as we take it today. Some of the things that came out of that is we are now mandated to arrest when we have probable cause. So if we have probable cause when we respond to a domestic violence complaint, we're mandated as police officers to make an arrest in that situation. We don't have a choice. The victim can't say, "I don't want my husband" or "I don't want my roommate arrested." It's not their choice. The state prosecutes and presses charges in these cases. There's a mandated next day court appearance and arraignment. So we have to have all of our paperwork complete and done by the next day court arraignment. That may be a Friday, and it's not due till Monday, but generally it's during the week, and it's due the following business day, following court day. There's a bunch of firearm seizure rules that encompass this state statute. And again, like I said, there's procedures in the statute to prevent threatening, to discourage requests for police assistance by the police officers themselves. Again, that old adage, if we have to come back, one of you guys is getting arrested. It's unlawful for us to say that to somebody at one of these cases. Police at the scene shall now provide immediate assistance to the victim. So in the policy and in the statute, it says that we have to stay at the victim's house until the probability of violence is gone. It's very vague, but it's in the statute and the policy. So we've taken a bunch of steps, and the state has taken a bunch of steps and put them in place to allow us to leave with some safety planning in place. In policy requirements, so let's talk about that a little bit. Connecticut model policy, it's victim-centered. It's meant to break the cycle of domestic violence, and ultimately the goal is to prevent death in these cases. The state minimum standard model policy that we must follow is 37 pages long. In that 37-page document, it dictates agency responsibilities, dispatch and police officer responsibilities when we're taking a call for service, supervisor responsibilities, reporting responsibilities, and additional mandated considerations such as children and pets. There's DCF, and there's also a pet referral that goes to court, and it goes to the Office of Victim Services. So there's actually protective orders for pets in these type of circumstances. So our policy mimics the state policy. Basically, the bullet points are pretty simple. We make arrest decisions in such cases in accordance with traditional probable cause standards and existing state statute. We still need probable cause for an arrest. So we still need the reasonable belief that a crime was committed. So a crime could be disorderly conduct, could be assault, could be threatening. Any of those crimes could fit in these type of investigations. Obviously, we're trying to protect the victims in these cases. When we're trying to give them available community services and support. And we're trying to promote officer safety when dealing with family violence situations. So our policy meets all the state minimum standards and guidelines, codifies pretty much what we've always done at these investigations. It provides for victim safety because that's, quite frankly, our business. That's why we come and put this uniform and badge on each day, is to protect victims. And it provides safety planning and advocacy, which, again, those are terms. It's something that we've basically always done as a police department, but this policy codifies what we've always done. And we've taken a look at it over the years, and there's a program that we're going to talk about. It's called the Lethality Assessment Program. And we thought, can we do more involving the victims? And the answer is yes. Some of our other policies that encompass domestic violence are our protective and restraining order policies. So there's many forms and there's many stipulations that we have to adhere to when we receive a protective order from the court, or if we receive a restraining order, or in a case where we make an arrest, we issue a conditional release order, and we'll just talk about that in a few minutes. So I mentioned the lethality assessment program. A short video here, which kind of gives you an overview on what the lethality assessment program is and why it's in place. Short 15-minute video.
When I respond to a domestic violence call, it's a mixed feeling of excited, anxiety, but go back to your training and you're judging the scene, trying to get ready to expect
We'll see if we can get some audio here for you.
One more time.
When I respond to a domestic violence call, it's a mixed feeling of excited, anxiety.
See, people wonder why we have an IT director. Just turn the volume up on the computer, and we'll go with it.
Go back to your training and you're judging the scene.
Yeah, I think that's all we have for volume on the
Expected,
computer.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
Is the speaker, is there volume on speaker?
There is, but it's not operating. Anyway, that video was about police officers who have responded to, and we'll say 15 minutes here, about police officers who have responded to serious domestic violence incidents. They're local police officers. Their departments, back in 2012, had decided to partake in the lethality assessment pilot program. 14 police departments in Connecticut were in that program at the time, and these officers are
Microphone.
this works, that's why he's got the bars.
When I respond to
See
a
that?
domestic violence call, it's a mixed feeling of excited and anxiety, but you go back to your training and you're judging the scene and trying to get ready to expect the unexpected.
Went to a domestic violence incident in which a boyfriend killed his girlfriend and their 6-month-old child. That was probably the worst call that I had went to in my entire life. He strangled both of them, and it's the worst thing I've ever seen.
This woman was scalped, and she was severely, severely injured. She was taken to the hospital. She remained in the hospital for almost 3 weeks.
In June of 2009, responded to a house, 4 people inside. One was a male intoxicated, throwing stuff. Arrived on scene with my fellow sergeant, fellow officer. We're on scene for a while, speaking with 2 of the victims. Suspect was more agitated, highly intoxicated, became aggressive towards us. An altercation went out. One of my partner officers was stabbed in the forearm, in which then I ended up shooting the suspect twice.
So that's a Waterford officer. The other officer is a Groton
It was a double
police officer.
homicide, and, you know, in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to see if there was something that, you know, we could do to prevent something like that in the future.
Hi, my name is Joe Froelich, and I am the Law Enforcement Coordinator with the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the lethality assessment program and its introduction into the state of Connecticut. In 2012, Connecticut implemented the lethality assessment program with 14 police departments across the state and 8 domestic violence providers. And during that time, we have been able to work with the police departments and the domestic violence providers to help provide safety for victims. This program came about because of a research that was done in Maryland by Dr. Jacqueline Campbell. 25 years of research, she was able to develop an 11-question survey that officers can ask at the scene of a domestic violence crime. And during that time, the officers can assess whether or not that victim is in high danger. The officers will conduct the lethality assessment, and from that information, they can make an immediate connection to the domestic violence services. Those connections, we have found, have helped provide immediate safety planning for the victims and have strengthened the collaboration between law enforcement and our domestic violence programs. One of the reasons that Connecticut looked at the lethality assessment program was that in Maryland, when they studied 2,500 homicides, they found police officers were on scene 50% of the time prior to those homicides, but in only 4% of those cases did the victims reach out for assistance. We saw this as an opportunity to make that connection immediately and to get more people involved in the safety planning and helping them with services. During the 15 months that this program has been implemented, we've expanded it to include 30 police departments, and we've conducted over 2,000 lethality assessment screens. And during that time, 58% of those screens show high danger, meaning that those victims needed immediate connection to domestic violence programs. The police officers have been able, in 81% of the time, to convince the victim of their safety needs and have them talk directly to a domestic violence advocate. And during that time, there's immediate safety planning done, and then from there, there's follow-up services. In 70% of the time, when the victim speaks with a domestic violence provider, they then follow up with continued services. The domestic violence advocate takes these seriously and continues with that follow-up to help with the safety planning and with providing all of the resources needed to keep that victim safe. The questionnaire consists of 11 questions. They are straightforward and simple questions requiring a yes or no response from the victim. The first 3 questions, if they're answered yes, would automatically dictate a referral to the domestic violence provider. However, we encourage officers to ask all 11 questions in the order in which they're presented and in the manner in which they're worded. So the officers would ask those questions, and at the conclusion of the entire screen, then make an assessment as to whether or not a protocol has been met where they would call the domestic violence provider. All of this information would be gathered and given to the domestic violence provider. It is my hope that through this training, you will learn tactics and techniques to help keep victims safe. You will ask appropriate questions and be able to evaluate a victim's safety immediately and provide them with the services that they'll need by connecting them to the domestic violence providers so that they are safe and they stay alive.
Hi, Elizabeth. Part of what we do at the police department is we have a lethality assessment tool, and we do this to make sure that you're safe and to make sure that you're not in any danger of being harmed. So it's a set of questions that we'll just go through just to make sure that you're okay. The first one is, has he ever used a weapon against you or threatened you with a weapon?
Yes.
Has he threatened to kill you or your children?
Yes.
Do you think he might try to kill you?
No.
Does he have a gun or can he easily get one?
No.
Has he ever tried to choke you?
No.
Has he violently or constantly jealous, or does he control most of your daily activities?
Yes.
Have you left him or separated with him since being married?
No. I couldn't. He would track me down.
Is he unemployed?
Yes.
Has he ever tried to kill himself?
Yes.
Do you have a child that he knows is not his?
No.
Does he follow or spy on you or leave threatening messages?
Yes.
Elizabeth, is there anything else that worries you about your safety?
I'm a little bit worried that if I left, he would come and harm our pets or our house. So I'm a little worried about that.
Elizabeth, because of some of your answers to the questions on the questionnaire, I'm concerned for your safety. So I'd like to make a phone call to a domestic violence advocate so they can help put a safety plan together for you.
Okay.
This questionnaire allows for officers to make referrals based on their own belief, meaning that if they do not have the appropriate number of yes responses, they can still make a referral to the domestic violence program based on the totality of all the circumstances that they've looked at. So therefore, an officer's training and experience is very important when they are conducting these interviews.
My name's Nick Mullins. I'm a sergeant with the Plainville, Connecticut Police Department. We began using the lethality assessment program about 1.5 years ago. Naturally, early on, some officers were a little hesitant and looked at the program as just another form they had to fill out. Our administration worked very hard to first influence supervisors, because supervisors are the ones out in the field ensuring that the program is done and it's done correctly. I can remember how we used to treat family violence. Not that we didn't treat it seriously, it's just we didn't treat it with the urgency that we do now. So I think the LAP screen kind of just puts all the pieces that were already there, puts them together in one format, a consistent approach that each and every police officer is using in our department when responding to a family violence incident.
My name is Matt Fedor. I've been with the Waterford Police Department for about 9 years now. Before we were responding to domestics, physical or verbal, prior to having the LAP training, our concern was always figuring out what happened. If we had to arrest someone, remove them, that was it. And when you left the scene, it almost felt like it was missing something because you just left the victim at home. Now with the LAP program, it opens the door for more opportunities to assist the victim and more care towards the victim while you're still taking care of the situation and arresting the suspect that you need.
I think LAP makes the dangerous situation more real to everybody. The victim, the police officer, they can see it on a piece of paper. Wow, I screened in at high danger level. Okay, we're going to connect you with an advocate right away. Getting in contact with an advocate is getting the wheels in motion to come up with a safety plan, which many times probably did, if not save their life, save them from future abuse at the hands of that, intimate partner.
I'm Antoinette. I work at Safe Futures. I answer the LAP calls when they come in. Having the LAP system in place has really changed to a great degree how we work with victims, and it works out to be a more succinct, it's direct, it gives us the ability to work as a team, the police department and the hotline advocate, the LAP advocate. And it creates a kind of the bond that we can create as we're dialoguing with people through this very difficult time and all this trauma really makes the police officer seem more human and personal, and it also helps us to be able to connect with the victim, so that the victim really feels more comfortable at every stage. The lap interview, the dialogue that the police officer and I have, and we always make sure that when we're dealing with the victim, that the victim is very well aware that this is a team effort and we're not going to leave them alone, we are going to service them, and we're going to make sure that they're safe from that point on.
My name is Lieutenant Bruce Lowe, and I'm with the City of Groton Police Department. I'm currently serving as a support services lieutenant in the City of Groton Police Department. I think officers are much more cognitive of some of the cues to domestic violence incidents that would lead them to believe that it may be a more serious incident than that they previously had thought. I think it makes officers delve a little deeper into maybe past history to see if there has been a prior history of domestic violence. It definitely, officers are thinking a little bit more about it.
For me, when I go to a residence for a domestic situation, whether verbal, physical, whatever it might be, the lab doesn't seem to help me when I go there, but when I'm dealing with the victim afterwards, it feels that I can offer them more than, well, he was arrested and we'll see what happens, or she was arrested, good luck almost, because we leave at that point. But now it seems with LAP, it opens the door and gives the victim more opportunities than just us leaving.
Our department treats all family violence incidents as serious. So we never felt that the role of the police should end once an arrest is made. With the lethality assessment program, the police now play a more active role in facilitating assistance for the victims, such as by putting them in phone contact with an advocate right from the scene. It almost empowers them because they know they're playing a major role in facilitating assistance for the victim. That's what we want to do all along. So instead of just telling the victim, hey, you may want to consider, for us it's Prudence Crandall, you may want to consider reaching out to Prudence Crandall within a day or two. Now, we'll place the phone call for them and we say, we think it's in your best interest to connect with a victim advocate. And the victims certainly appreciate it because they now look at us like, oh wow, they really care about my safety.
There's something that happens when you're working with the police officers and when they are working with us. It may seem intangible, but in that brief dialogue, and we don't have a lot of time because the police officers are busy, as we are, and it says to those victims, I really must be important. Not only is that police officer with me and helping me, but they haven't left me hanging. They gave me someone else to speak with, and then I can speak with them and tell them what we can do for them.
I want to stress too that the lethality assessment program not only benefits victims, it benefits police officers as well. It's formalized and creates a structure to which we are looking to do anyway. Officers in the field now don't have to worry that they forgot to ask the victim a specific question because the questions are laid out for them on a piece of paper. We now provide a more consistent approach to safety planning and to assessing the dangerousness of a situation. And another way it's helped us is we found, among other things, we can use a screen-in to help justify a high bail amount. I'll go back to how our department treats family violence. All of them are serious. Therefore, the bail for the offender should reflect the seriousness of the charges. So if we get a screen-in from a victim, again, we can use that, among other things, to help justify a high bail amount?
When those questions were asked, and when those police officers stayed with her and worked with her, and I worked with her with them, that was really the first time that for this victim, she got it. She got that she almost died.
I think the program is working, and we've had some good responses from the community about it, and I believe we've maybe saved some individuals from being seriously injured or possibly being killed because of that.
I have no doubt that the lap screen has saved lives.
The best outcome that we can hope for is that the police officer and the victim advocates can work together to not only keep the victim safe, but alive.
Right, so lethality assessment is a program that we trained our officers on in July. We started on August 1st, where the chief issued a policy. Since August 1st, we've had 7 lethality assessment screens. 3 have been protocol referrals. What that means is we automatically make a call to the victim's advocate. 2 of those victims have agreed to speak with the victim's advocate. Fortunately, the one where her significant other racked a sawed-off shotgun round into the chamber and then chambered a round into his Glock pistol, sought treatment and sought to get out of that cycle of violence. So this stuff is going on in Old Saybrook, and this lethality assessment gives us another tool to try to assist the victims. So additional considerations for the agency. Domestic violence calls are statistically one of the most dangerous incidents for police officers to respond to. So obviously in these situations, emotions are running high. It's not always your typical household where the police are known at the residence. A lot of times this is the first contact that this family's ever had with the police department. So we're responding to those types of residents. Clearly, obviously, nobody wants to see us in these situations, but when people fear for their safety, they call 911, and we're walking into this volatile situation. These calls for service require a 2-officer response. One of the officers has to be a supervisor. That's required by policy. It's got to be a 2-officer response, and at least one of the officers has to be a supervisor. There's time constraints. We're going to walk through a quick domestic violence incident considerations that we have to take, and it doesn't take 10 minutes. This takes about 45 minutes at the least, and at the most, we talked about it, weeks with one of those cases where we have to do search warrants for the house, and we have officers sitting there to maintain custody of the house. These investigations can take a long time. So a domestic violence call, policy, state policy, Old Saybrook policy, dispatch has to ask certain questions, mandated. Our emergency police dispatch protocols take care of that. So our EPD protocols that are in place on the computer take care of the mandated questions that we have to ask. It's under the caller in danger protocol. It basically asks all the same questions for any caller in danger type protocol if the physical violence is currently active. The communication center dispatches the closest 2 police units and a supervisor to the scene. Police units are going to arrive. They're going to make first responsibilities to make the scene safe, make sure that house is safe, make sure everybody in that house is safe, and determine who's in the house so that we can make sure that there was nobody needs medical attention. We're going to treat the injured parties, and then we're going to begin with the investigation. So as part of the investigation, the parties, any witnesses or subjects or unknowns at that point are separated and interviewed. Each officer interviews the other party. Obviously, we have protocols where we have to do that in a safe manner. So each person there gets interviewed, witnesses, victims, and subjects. Once we interview one party, we then have to confer with our fellow officer who's at the scene to find out what the other person said. Otherwise, we're going to have to switch off and make personal contact with each of the parties at the scene. And then we're going to kind of talk about what happened amongst each other, keeping the parties separated, and determine what we're going to do. We're going to compare verbal interview statements, and we're going to make arrest decisions at that point. If people are taken into custody, that's the point where they're placed into handcuffs, and those situations can get tense because obviously the victim may not want the subject to be taken into custody. Although it's not their choice in these type of situations. Again, we're mandated, it's a mandated arrest by statute, and the person is getting arrested if there's probable cause. So at that point, it can turn a relatively calm situation into a volatile situation. Written statements have to be taken from all victims and witnesses, which can be time consuming. We have to photograph the victim's injuries and the scene. So if it's a residence, we're going to photograph where the argument or fight took place and whatever damage that may be there. Victims provided a victim services informational sheet. If it's intimate partner relationship, we do a lethality assessment, program that we just saw the video on. And if the victim screens in per protocol, or if we think it's necessary, we would contact the victim's advocate from the victim's house on our department cell phone, and they basically give us a quick screen. We tell them about the lethality assessment, and we then give the victim the opportunity to talk to the family violence advocate. Firearms. Again, we talked a little bit about firearms in a previous slide, but if firearms are in plain view or involved in the situation, they're automatically seized. So in those situations, the firearms are secured, brought back to the police department and stored in the armory. If they're evidence, obviously they go into the evidence locker, but if they're not, they're just taken for safekeeping, they go into the armory. Safety plan. The lethality assessment program is basically for intimate partner safety planning. That's what it basically covers on our end. It closes that loop I talked about with the policy earlier. It basically protects us, and it also provides a greater support for the victim. That's what it does.
Can you just highlight the different relationships that are mandated under the statute?
Sure. So we'll go over intimate partner first of all. Is husband and wife. Having dated or recently dated, been in a dating relationship, or having or have lived together in the past. So that's intimate partner, those three situations. Family violence, domestic violence is household members. It's all of those situations, and instructor, yeah. There's two more. Having lived together or lived together in the past, dating relationship, related by blood or marriage, and have a child in common. So those are the players, so to speak, in a family violence, domestic violence incident. So once we go over the safety plan, dual arrest situations, we have to make arrangements, obviously, for anybody else who's at the house. If they have children, we have to make arrangements for where the children are going to go to be safe, at least for the night. And obviously, we're going to be calling DCF in those circumstances. We make considerations for pets. Obviously, you just can't leave a pet at a residence, a vacant residence, so we have to make those types of considerations. And the residence or property has to be secured properly so that we don't get accused of, leaving an unsecured residence when we leave there. Prisoners are transported and processed. Evidence, if there is any, is logged. Bond considerations are made in accordance with our bond policy. So we have a general order that is specific to setting bonds and stipulations with bonds. The written report has to be reviewed by a supervisor, and it has to be prepared and ready for court the next day for arraignment. If one of the subjects, or if a subject is getting released on bond, we have to fill out a conditions of release. It's basically a local protective order that does get entered into the National Criminal Information System, so that if they do violate the order out of town, it's in the computer. If their name gets run, their name's going to come up with a protective order. So if a prisoner gets released over a long weekend, and there's a protective or a condition of release in place, it is in the system. Firearms risk warrants. So if somebody does have firearms, but they weren't in plain view, or they weren't used in the commission of a crime, and a protective order is issued, they have to surrender those firearms. If they fail to surrender those firearms, we have to write what we call a firearms risk warrant. It's a search warrant to secure those firearms at their residence. So this is in a case where there's a protective order in place, and the person refuses to surrender their firearms. So obviously those are time consuming. We have to draft and review that warrant. We have to get it reviewed by a prosecutor, and then we have to present it and attest to the search warrant to a judge. And then if the judge issues it, we obviously have to put a plan in place and go and serve the order to seize those firearms. Obviously, if we make a domestic arrest and the person doesn't make bond, we're responsible for transporting them to court in the morning. So we have to make considerations for transport, prisoner transport each morning if we do have a prisoner. And following their court arraignment, we receive the protective order from court. It comes on the fax machine. The dispatcher is in charge of taking off the fax machine and entering it into a case. They then check and send a firearms request up to the State Police Firearms Unit to see what firearms they have in their possession. If they have firearms, we send 2 officers to the house to remind the subject that they have to surrender their firearms within 24 hours. And since we don't have much room in the armory, we tell them to bring the firearms to the state police, which I'm told their armory is getting, has limited space also. So that might be something that we see in the future, is that firearms are going to be surrendered locally. It's been some talk at the state level. We'll see how that goes. And then, like I just said, securing firearms. It's going to be, it will be an issue at some point. Following that, the next day, we sometimes follow up with the victim, especially if there's injuries and we want to document what the injuries look like the next day. Sometimes bruising or abrasions, you don't get the full effect until the next day when they start to really show their color. We try to connect victims to local services if needed, heat, healthcare, social services, and we perform additional investigation as necessary. Like I talked about with a major case, it doesn't end the next day. It proceeds sometimes for at least a month. So that is all. Questions at this time?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Sergeant Perry for putting together that phenomenal briefing for you. As you can see, we take domestic violence very seriously in Connecticut and obviously in Saybrook. We have a tremendous concern for serving victims of all crime, but particularly victims of domestic violence. Instituting the lethality assessment program has been paramount to furthering the protection of victims and hopefully breaking that cycle of domestic violence. You know, this also highlights on how many of the activities that we perform as a police department are highly regulated by state statute, by the Police Officer Standards and Training Council, by coming out with model policy that we all agencies have to adhere to. You know, when Sergeant Perry mentions the 37-page document as a policy, so as a young patrol officer, you go to a domestic violence call, you must follow a 37-page policy issued by the state that you don't have in your hands, while you're standing in someone's house, or on the side of the road in a car, or in the parking lot of a shopping center, or in a hotel, or in a boat, having to investigate a domestic violence incident, yet you are still held to that standard. So domestic violence calls are extremely stressful for law enforcement professionals, but as you saw in the video, those officers portrayed in the video have a true desire to help. And your officers in Old Saybrook certainly echo that. So police officers don't sign up for the job just to go make arrests and say, look at who I arrested. They're really in it to prevent crime and assist victims of crime, and this program certainly highlights that. So thank you very much, Sergeant Perry, for doing that outstanding presentation.
Any questions at this point? No. Move on to executive reports, please, Chief.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so in your packets you have the 15-16 overview of our budget, expenses and supplies and contractual. Just a couple of things to note on that. Under the contractual summary, you see that the SBC telephone system, which is what we've called that line item for this fiscal year, that'll change next fiscal year, is over. That's due to the fact that we're still trying to receive a reimbursement from AT&T, Frontier, SBC, whichever they are, for some of the warranty on the previous phone system that we no longer have anymore, the service agreement, and for paying for the service agreement for our new phone system, which was not known at the time of the budget creation, which obviously we reported during the budget process. So hopefully at the end of the day, we'll only see a slight overrun in that category, but the maintenance of the new phone system will be more than the $2,500 that was originally budgeted. If there are no questions, I could report the balances.
Just a couple of categories. One is emergency communications is just about used up. Is that some unforeseen, or is that just standard?
No, there's some things that we were waiting to the beginning of this fiscal year to purchase. So in some of the categories, you see a higher percent encumbered in comparison to how much of a percent of a fiscal year that we've already gone through. For example, gasoline's 98% encumbered. That's because the bill was due on July 1st. So it's very similar to some of our emergency communications expenditures.
Okay, thank you.
And how about a similar answer to first responder medical equipment?
Yeah, so we were putting off the purchase of replacing some of our epinephrine as well as our defibrillator electrodes until the beginning of the year until we have more monies available. So I think we're going to be good in that category. There is some interesting point, actually, I'm kind of glad you brought that up. Now that all police officers are required to carry Narcan to reverse a heroin-style overdose, and actually Senator Blumenthal's office is now spearheading this, the price of Narcan, since that statute was enacted, has doubled. What we've asked the Senator's office to also look at is the price of epinephrine. So as allergies have become more prevalent, the price of epinephrine has gone up almost 400% in the last 8 years. So EpiPens that we used to purchase for $80, $90 are now $300, $400 items. So we have worked very closely with our supplier to be able to swap out expired ones rather than just buy new ones. But obviously when we're using them, we're using them. And we're required to carry obviously a pediatric dose as well as an adult dose. So it'd be very interesting to see, hopefully the epinephrine gets wrapped in with the Narcan, and the government kind of puts a stop to when we enact laws to say our first responders need to be carrying medicines that will save lives. We shouldn't increase the cost of those medicines. So hopefully that will resolve itself.
Through the financials?
Sure. So the balances to report to you this month: the asset forfeiture account, $24,014.56. The police administrative fund, $17,061.14. The traffic safety fund, $36,338.89. The law enforcement fund, $17,207.53. The Old Saybrook Police Fund, $320. The Police Explorer Fund, $5,368.83. And the Off-Budget Canine Fund, $1,812.93.
Okay. Any questions? Move on to administrative, please.
Just a couple updates on the appointments. So Patrolman Trainee Hardy and Millardo are doing well at the Police Academy. They're on their 3rd week, going on their 4th, I think now. So we've not heard any bad things. So no news is good news. They're going through their transition period, if you will. Probably some of the hardest times that they'll have at the Police Academy getting orientated to the training. So again, they're doing well. No news is good news. The dispatchers are still in contract negotiations. I have had some conversations with the union president, who has expressed some concerns about the potential of maybe some inappropriate conversations that have been happening in regards to their contractual negotiations. They are working with their union leadership to see if there's any violations of the law that have actually occurred. I am hopeful that both parties can get back to the table and that we can resume negotiations. It is in everyone's best interest, the department, the personnel, and obviously the taxpayer, to have them come to a resolution before we go to binding arbitration, which is very costly. So hopefully negotiations will resume in the coming weeks.
I have a question about that. Where's the complaint coming from regarding that? You know, with the inappropriate.
It's a concern that the dispatcher union has expressed to me.
Coming from within to them?
I would say it's a legal issue for the union to decide what they want to pursue. I do want to mention, not on the agenda here, but I'll mention it under personnel. At the beginning of every meeting, we go through the minutes and we choose to approve them or amend them. A lot has been said, certainly, during the past couple months in regards to transparency. Our minutes are more detailed than any other town commissioner's minutes. So if you go on the town website, or you go to the town clerk's office, and you take a look at meeting minutes for any other board or commission, none of them are this detailed. Trent did a phenomenal job. Jen has now come right up to par with that, and I appreciate the service that she's offering, not only the commission, but my department. But we remain extremely transparent. You don't need to watch the video. All you really need to do is read the minutes, and it's all right there. And I think that's very important for our agency to continue to do that. So I appreciate the work that Jen is doing. Our new facility, we've had some warranty work completed, which is very, very exciting. So they claim that the HVAC system, the humidity control issue, has been fixed. I said, I'll see you in the spring and let you know when the humidity returns, if the humidity control system is actually working. Some of the ceiling tiles that were stained due to the humidity issue in the building have been replaced. Just this past week, they replaced the floor in the kitchen, the quartermaster office, our records archive room, and the dispatcher kitchen area. Next week, they will remove the lieutenant and I from our offices and begin fixing the flooring areas there. About 90% of the pavement issues have been remedied. They still have a little bit more work to do. I reported previously that with the new landscaper on board, we finally have landscaping that looks very nice. We do, however, continue to struggle. Struggle is as nice of a political word I can use, with two of the subcontractors that have to do with our access control system and our internal camera system. We now have control over our camera system, but it's not operating within the parameters that the bid specifications detail or the parameters that we as a law enforcement agency need them to operate in. And we still do not have any control over our own access control system, which I think is absolutely deplorable. So we have been open since April as a law enforcement facility, and these subcontractors have not yet been able to convey to us how to operate our own system. So very detailed emails, again, went back and forth today. I'm hoping that that issue will resolve itself by week's end, but I will continue to keep the commission updated on that. As far as the epoxy floor failure, there has still been no assignment of blame So in one of my detailed emails today to the construction company, while I do not blame them for the delay, clearly there are some people, whether it's those investigating or all the vendors involved with the epoxy flooring, no one is raising their hand and saying they're going to take responsibility. This is an operational issue for the department because it will cause a relocation. The availability of another facility in town that has cells might be dwindling, because I'm sure that person would like to rent out their building again, and right now they're kind of hanging on to help out the police department yet again. So I suggested that if we get no resolve, that perhaps we should bring the issue to the attention of the state's attorney general, and perhaps someone could intervene and perhaps help us. After all, we are a public safety entity. We're dealing with a warranty issue, and there is no Connecticut-based business that is willing to raise their hand and say, this is a problem, we'll warranty the work, and let's move forward. So I'm hoping, again, we'll get some more action on that by week's end.
Do we have any recourse with the general contractor to say, your problem now, get it fixed, and you can litigate with these guys after and get the money back?
Yeah, so again, I'm not privy to the intimate details between the Board of Selectmen and the Downs Construction Company. I will say this, that the Downs Construction Company on other, probably lesser financial impact type scenarios has stepped up and said, we're fixing this and we'll deal with it later. I think an example of that is the flooring remediation that's going on now. But the epoxy floor remediation is going to be quite costly, not to the Old Saybrook taxpayer, but costly to somebody. And I think that's why there's a reluctancy of raising your hand. However, there has been a lot of independent testing done. There's been independent testing, then more independent testers that come, and then yet a third independent testing company that's come to scrape the floor, core the floor, monitor the floor. There's been a lot of work done. Those lab results are back. They're being interpreted by somebody, and I think it's time that we take some action. So again, hopefully the Downs Construction Company will understand what I'm trying to say, and they will maybe make that decision or bring their vendors to a meeting and decide everyone's going to share fault or whatever. But I think something needs to happen for the Department of Police Services and for the Old Saybrook taxpayers that have paid for this bill.
And the raised access floor has been remediated. Was there blame assigned there? Was that ever figured out? Or
I have not been told who's at fault. They believe that the plywood, so they're using a different type of plywood for the subfloor. The plywood vendor says it's not my fault. Flooring vendor says, well, we just use the plywood, it's not our fault. So I think what's going to happen in that scenario is everyone's going to share a little bit of blame. But to Commissioner Stewart's point, the Downs Construction Company said, we're fixing this and getting it done. And that has seemed to be a hybrid of work between Downs Construction's laborers and the initial flooring company coming back to put on the top coat of flooring. And we also made some accommodations. Some rooms that had VCT tile went to more of a carpet tile, which is more resilient for the raised access flooring.
Chief, regarding the humidity control issue, you made a good point. We can't really test it under good circumstances today. When does the warranty clock start ticking on that?
It's a great question, and if you read some of my emails, you'll see me constantly say that I believe that the 1-year warranty starts from the time that remediation has ended. So if they told me 3 weeks ago, humidity control fixed, it should be a year from that time. When they fixed the floor in the kitchen, it should be a year from that flooring fix. As far as the access control system, we have not accepted it yet. I don't believe the warranty should have started. So I have asked for something in writing from the Downs Construction Company that says that. They have refused to provide that, but said they would honor the 1-year warranty. I would just like to see something in writing. So I brought that to the attention of the building committee several times, and it's really up to them and the Board of Selectmen to be able to hold the Downs Construction Company to their word. I have no doubt that they would not uphold their word. I'm just the kind of guy that likes to see it in writing.
Any other questions about the new facility?
So just the final thing on that, once again, I just want to reiterate again, once all the warranty work is done and the building committee is satisfied, we will be planning an open house. So I am dying to invite the community into our building so they can see what they paid for. But again, until the building committee hears from the construction company that it's time to do that, we cannot plan that event. But I'm eager to do so when they're done. Thank you, sir.
Item 6 is executive session. Interview and discuss candidates for position of patrolman. Do I have a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, would you mind inviting the three of us as well, Sergeant Barry, to work in the process?
Sure. Do you want to add that to your motion?
I include you.
You copy Adam.
Do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll be entering executive session. Obviously, as soon as our work is concluded that is under the executive session, we'll come back to regular. Okay, I'd like to re-enter regular session at 9:26. We are up to item number 7, discussion and action pertaining to the position of patrolman.
Make a motion that we authorize the chief of police to issue a conditional offer of employment, first to Tyler Schultz, second to William O'Connor, and upon successful completion of the hiring process, appoint Tyler Schultz first, second William O'Connor as a patrolman trainee at such a date that meets the operational needs of the department.
Second the motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Okay, law enforcement personnel selection process subcommittee report. As you recall, because of the new regulations as to how we must hire officers, the subcommittee has met 3 times, I think. Has made some good progress, and someone would like to give us a summary or update.
I can do that. As the chairman said, we met 3 times since our last meeting of the police commission. Our first meeting was rather abbreviated and primarily to decide the scope of the effort and possible future meeting dates. We agreed our mission statement was, and I quote, to review the hiring process for entry-level certified patrolmen and recommend to the commission any corrections or revisions to that process. We set then, also that first meeting, 2 more meeting dates, which we held meetings. And I want to thank Jen very much for her input to these, from the minutes that she took to this summary report. Our second meeting, we reviewed the application process and requirements for application from a number of different local communities. She supplied a table of those different requirements. We had each been online and looked at what was happening in the region, and from that there wasn't a significant amount of things we would recommend to change, only the age of applicants, whereas before, or as now, we currently have a requirement of being age 21 prior to application. We believe we could increase the pool if we reworded that requirement to 20 years at age of test and 21 years old by academy appointment. That would give us a little bit broader demographic to draw from. So that's one recommendation for the commission in general to consider. Third meeting was an in-depth review, and I want to thank the staff for providing a lot of background, a lot of example test material that we looked at, and none of us had to take the test, thank goodness. But we did learn a lot by going through it, and particularly the filtering program, quite rigorous. We were all impressed with the amount of background investigation that goes on before any offer is made to an entry-level patrolman. And what that results in is a law enforcement clearance that's the equivalent of any federal clearance I've ever been associated with. So I was pretty impressed with the level of background information that we're aware of and that these young people have to go through, submit themselves to. The interview process as it's conducted looks very good. We had the opportunity to look at how the interview boards that our sergeants go through and the lieutenant goes through different from the kind of questioning we do. And we took some opportunities to learn from that, and there's a recommendation the subcommittee would make to the commission for consideration that as as we did in executive session, we reduced the number of questions we used, but we build what's the wording I used here? Evaluation criteria and recommended follow-up questions into each question. So that each question would look more like a half page of initial question and potential follow-up. This obviously to be reviewed by Labor Council and approved, but it provides a much more conversational, much more in-depth experience of that commission interview. So that would be another recommendation for the commission to take up. And that's as far as we got. And we did outline some future activities, but I think those will be covered more at the next subcommittee meeting. Which is pending date because we're not sure who's going to be on the subcommittee.
I believe everyone got copies of the minutes from their meetings. We do not have to approve them at this meeting because they approved them at their minutes for their particular meetings. So those have already been approved by the subcommittee. They're in your packets for you to read through at your leisure.
So procedurally, we should stay ahead of the curve a little bit, and at some point, we need to have on a future, so let's, for example, if we wanted to make a decision on the 2021 thing, we can't do it tonight. It would have to be, we'd have to have it on the next agenda to take action on that. So, and I know we're in transition with the elections and everything, but I just remind everybody, we want to try to keep ahead so we can get it on a future agenda, so we can actually take action to, take value in all the work that you guys are doing. So just put that up.
Well, I think we need to get all their recommendations at once and handle it as a
perhaps, yeah,
chunk instead of piecemeal, I think would be a better way to do it. But yes, I agree. Right now, we hopefully don't have any need to go through the process at the moment, so, but it would be nice to have it ready for the next round.
I would also ask that, because we are in kind of a transition hybrid process now, that kind of we all reflect on how it went and give that to the subcommittee to put in the mix of things, because we're kind of living through part of it now, to kind of see, that might influence the subcommittee's recommendations. That's what I'm trying to say.
So maybe, to follow up on that, maybe that for the next commission's agenda, although the first commission meeting after an election is quite busy already, but if there's room for an agenda item on that or the following meeting, it would be to discuss the subcommittee's progress to date and outline future goals for the subcommittee.
Good. Any other questions about this subcommittee at the moment?
Thank you for the work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, David.
Sure. Thank you very much. Good working with you.
Okay, we have another opportunity for comments from the public. Yes, sir.
My name is Kevin Shea, and I apologize for missing the earlier comment period. I hope this is appropriate to give a general comment. I got tied up at work, but it was important to me to be here to tell you how much my wife and I appreciate how the situation last week was handled by this police department and by the chief himself. A couple days before the situation in Fairfield, Connecticut, which was a very bad situation, as I'm sure most of you have read the news. We had a situation in Old Saybrook, and we really appreciated the communication from Jan Pruccio, the school board, from the board, and really appreciated the way that the school board and the police department worked together that day to ensure that the kids hardly knew. I don't think that our kids knew what was going on. It was a normal day at school. But when my wife showed up to pick up the children at the end of the day, and not only were there several police cars, but there was the chief himself in front of the school, I can tell you that that's an incredible feeling of security to parents in a post-Newtown era. I know every generation's had its issues. My parents did the air raid drills under the desk, and but for this generation, this is a whole new experience that we're as parents sending our kids off to school every day. So I just want to thank the police department and thank the chief himself for, I mean, he didn't mail in, he was there. So.
Thank you for your... Yes.
I just have a clarification to make. I did appreciate the whole presentation on domestic violence. I've been a staunch advocate for tougher domestic violence laws. I followed Tracy Thurman's story from day one. Tracy Thurman was not murdered. Tracy Thurman was stabbed 12 or 13 times by her ex-husband. He jumped on her neck. She's paralyzed. I mean, she might as well have been murdered at that point. But I just want to clarify, she was the catalyst for all of the changes in these laws. If it weren't for the police officer that had to run back to the police station to use the bathroom, she might not have been in that situation. So that, I just want to clarify that she has gone on, she's lived a life. I mean, unfortunately, her kid's a mess over that, you know. I don't think you'll ever forget seeing your mother stabbed like that, but she is alive and, you know, she was not murdered. She's a poster child for domestic violence, and I just want her name to be out there and let people know that she still is alive and well.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I apologize if I misspoke.
Well, it's a serious issue. I don't think it's a laughing matter.
No, it's very, yes. Having dealt with some family situations, I can very much appreciate.
We can put stickers on whatever we want, but you're not gonna get the job done. And as far as, you know, all those interviews and stuff, that is great, and it is definitely a way. But when you get a battered woman in that situation, don't think that battered woman is gonna always answer you honestly. That's just a word of advice.
It's a situation where it's a work in progress.
Oh, definitely. And no, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Great strides. No one's saying the end game is here. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Donald Cooper, in reference to this lady's comment, when Sergeant was giving his presentation about confiscating guns, there were other deadly weapons, obviously, as she alluded to. If they're present at an invisible site or in the hands of the attacker, will the police confiscate those weapons too, or is that somewhere more hard to define?
So if a weapon is used
somebody
in the...
has, you know, a sword, you know, swords in obviously places, hunting knives, whatever, that they might be threatening the victim with, is that a confiscatable situation, or the law is instructed to address those at this point?
So if the weapon is used in the commission of a crime...
Well, it hasn't been committed yet.
Mr. Cooper, I'm trying to answer your question, sir.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to explain that.
Okay.
So the question is, you know, you come in, you see a gun, invisible sight, you confiscate the gun, but if somebody has whatever kind of sword it might be, decorative sword, martial arts sword, or you know, hunting knives that are there that obviously could be used in the same situation, or might have been used in this situation, do those get confiscated, or is that a change that needs to be addressed with the law and the procedure?
So if a weapon, any type of weapon is used in the commission of a crime, it can be seized as evidence. However, the risk warrant application that was discussed in detail in Sergeant DePerry's presentation is specific to firearms, and that's
Right.
based on state statute.
That was my question, yeah. So does it need to be expanded? That's, or addressed at least?
I think that's a more global question. I'd have to discuss with the chief whether that's something that can be handled on a local basis and just in the town of Old Saybrook, or whether that's got to be a state legislature, statewide.
I don't know the answer, and I don't expect.
Neither do I.
As a police department, all we can do is enforce the existing state statutes.
Yeah.
We don't make comment on whether statutes need to be enhanced or not. That's not our role in society.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, seeing no others. Comments from the chief?
Thank you. I just have 3 quick comments. The first of all is obviously there was a little bit of publicity over a very critical incident that occurred at one of our hotels. Without going into any detail, because it still is an ongoing investigation, I just want this commission to know how well your personnel performed. From the dispatcher in heavy negotiation on 911 to personnel involved in evacuation to people who literally had guns pointed at a hotel room for over 2 hours until support arrived. The men and women of the Department of Police Services rallied, came in when they were needed, and performed admirably at a very critical scene. I also want to compliment the Connecticut State Police, the Madison Police Department, and the Clinton Police Department for their assistance with us that evening. They all formed underneath our existing incident command structure. They took direction as needed and performed their tasks seamlessly, which made for a very safe and secure operation for law enforcement personnel and the victims involved in the scenario that had to be evacuated and relocated. Secondly, I appreciate some of the positive comments from the members of the audience in regards to a recent incident involving our school district. The only thing that I would like to brief the commission is, again, how invaluable our school resource officer program is, and how enhanced the relationship is between the Department of Police Services and the leadership of the school district, including all of our school administrators. Literally, sadly it had to happen, but everything was seamless. Communication began at 11:30 that night. I was on the phone with the superintendent at 4 o'clock in the morning, and parents were notified in a timely manner, staff was notified in a timely manner, arrests were made, very detailed investigation happened, and we had a safe, uneventful day of school. And that could not have happened without the professionalism of our officers on the midnight shift and our phenomenal working relationship with the school administrators. So I just want to publicly thank Jan Peruccio and her leadership team for working so well with the Department of Police Services to ensure a well-communicated and safe day of school for all of our staff and students. My final comment, although I will get in trouble for this, I am more than prepared to take the consequences. I want to talk a little bit about Commissioner Sparrow. On behalf of the Department of Police Services Commissioner, I want to sincerely thank you for your dedicated years of service. I think sometimes the service to the town of Old Saybrook as a volunteer is overlooked, so let me hit some high points. You were first elected to your position November 2nd, 1971, some 44 years ago. I hate to tell you this, I am not yet 44 years old. You were re-elected by the citizens of the town of Old Saybrook 11 times. 11 municipal elections strong. People said they wanted you as part of their representatives to lead the Department of Police Services. You have seen many selectmen come and go. You've seen many police commissioners come and go. You've seen people with personal agendas or political agendas, but you have never been one of them. You have never been the one to watch your name on a plaque, which is why there's not one here tonight, because I know I would be in trouble for that. You were never the one to stand up and want recognition. However, you have served in every single office that this police commission has had over the last 44 years. You are truly dedicated to the citizens of the town of Old Saybrook. You've been dedicated to watching the Department of Police Services become a more professional policing organization. You've always stood up for the men and women of the Department of Police Services to make sure that they had the tools to do their job, and more importantly, to do their job safely. You have never had an agenda. Instead, your agenda has been ensuring the public's trust in the police department and making sure that we could be there for whomever it was in their true time of need. I'd be remiss if I did not speak about Lenore, who has been by your side, driving you to meetings in sickness and in health, making sure that you were supported at home during some very tumultuous times while you served on the police commission. So while there will be no plaque, because you will not allow that, in the spring, I will proudly lead a ceremony on the new grounds of the police department that you can watch from your front porch, although we are going to drag you over to our property, where we will plant a tree in your honor that will grow and watch the department grow just as you have done as a police commissioner for the past 44 years. I now ask the police commission and the members of the audience to put aside strange political differences a month away from the election and give you the recognition that you deserve. And please join me in a rising vote of thanks for 44 years of service.
At a loss for words. I have enjoyed all these years working for the police department, town of Saybrook. I've seen many, as he said, many people come. I've seen a lot of them go. I think that We have in this town the best of policemen, chiefs, and commissioners. We've been very, very fortunate. We've done a lot of things that have gone on here over the years. I've been very, very proud to be part of it. And I want to thank all of you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Any comments and or concerns from the commissioners?
Well, I'd just like to say ditto for Ernie, I'm gonna miss your quiet, logical, analyzing of the issues. And I think we're all going to miss the great historical information that you have when a question comes up, and your intimate knowledge of the budget. There's nobody on the commission that knows what's going on with the money in the department as well as you do. And we're gonna miss your input.
Thank you again, Ernie. Appreciate it. You've forgotten more about the police commission than I know or ever will, so thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Oh, yep, sir.
Yeah, so, thank you for all the positive comments about the situation in school last week, and as a school administrator, I actually understand perhaps better than anybody in the room who's not a member of law enforcement here, what really takes place behind the scenes in those. And I was very pleased with the communication from the superintendent. I guess my concern or my request moving forward, Chief, is we as commissioners, I know we're not privy to non-public information, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, but when there are large incidences in the past, you have briefed us. I certainly had all the information because I'm a parent and I was on the public school distribution list. I'm not sure that all the other commissioners had that information, and it was although it was didn't turn out to be a large safety issue, it was a very large emotional issue, as you heard from some of the fathers here tonight. So I asked moving forward if we have similar situations that you consider putting this kind of thing in the same kind of categories you put some of the incidents and reach out to the commission so we're all on the same page.
Okay. Take that under consideration. Thank you. Anyone else? Motion to adjourn?
I think you should let Ernie make that motion.
We'll move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.